Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Brendan Grant, and if you don't know me, I have been a freelance cinematographer and still photographer for over 6+ years now, and this channel is dedicated to education and inspiration for filmmaking and still photography. And today I wanted to talk to you guys about my top 5 best tips for how to improve yourself as a still photographer. So the other day I was shooting a commercial at a soccer stadium here in Los Angeles, and I was approached by one of the employees working at the stadium who was a hobbyist photographer, and he came up to me, saw me with my camera, and he just asked me for professional advice on how to get into photography, how to become a better photographer, and how to make that transition from a hobbyist into making money from photography. And I tried to give him my best advice in the moment, but after thinking about that interaction for the last couple of days, I decided it might be really good for me to put together some of my top 5 tips. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So my number 1 tip, and this was also the same thing that I told the guy a few days ago, is bring your camera everywhere you go. And this is something I've talked about on a lot of my last few videos, actually looking for a camera that was more portable that I can bring with me everywhere I go. But especially if you're just starting out and you're trying to build your skills and develop yourself as an artist and as a photographer, you want to take your camera everywhere. You're building your portfolio, and you just want to start seeing the world through the lens of a camera and taking tons and tons of pictures. Ultimately, the only way to improve your skills is to actually be out there taking photos. And even if you don't have professional work to be taking photos, you want to be able to develop your skills in a non-professional setting first, so when you get to the professional stuff, you actually know what you're doing. And this allows you to not only build your portfolio, but build your style and your sensibilities as an artist, and also to figure out what type of photography interests you the most. For instance, are you interested in fashion photography? Are you interested in automotive photography, architectural photography? Are you like me and you really love street photography, documentary style photography? There's so many different avenues that you can take photography, and the only way to figure out what you love the most and what you're the best at and what speaks to you and what you enjoy is to actually get out there and start taking pictures, start dabbling and experimenting. And yeah, so that is my number 1 top tip. If you think this might be a career for you, just get out there and start taking pictures every single day. Take thousands and thousands of pictures, and not only will you get better, not only will you discover your style and your voice as an artist, but you'll actually figure out if you really truly like this enough to have a career in it. So another thing that I was talking about in this conversation I had with the employee at the soccer stadium was he was a little bit caught between his own tastes and opinions on what makes a good photo, and then sharing his photos online to different Facebook groups and getting other people's opinions and conflicting opinions, and he just really wasn't sure. And the advice that I gave him was to maybe stop listening to everybody else's opinions and to start exploring other photographers that you like, other photos that you like, movies that you like, paintings that you like. Figure out what it is about these different visual mediums, about these different photographers and their styles and their techniques that you personally like, and then figure out what those things are, how they created that look. And then you can start implementing that or experimenting and figuring out how they did those certain things in your own photos. And I do this a lot, and this is the number 1 tip I have for at least figuring out what makes a good photo for you. And there are so many different opinions out there. Some people are going to love your photos, some people aren't. That doesn't mean you take bad photos, but ultimately the main voice you should be listening to is your own voice. But it gets crazy, you know? If you really enjoy abstract stuff and out of focus images, and I mean the list goes on, right? You can get so experimental and abstract with it if that's your style and your taste. And you might think a really abstract photo is really cool, whereas someone else who does maybe more commercialized type of work maybe isn't into abstract stuff and thinks an abstract photo is bad. So ultimately, you have to look at other photographers and other work that you like and appreciate and figure out what it is about those images that you like so much, and then try to replicate that in your own work. And in the process of doing so, along with my first tip, which was to take just tons of photos, is you eventually start to develop your own taste, your own sensibilities, your own style, and your own techniques that are influenced and drawn from a lot of different areas, but ultimately built from your own experience as you're taking pictures, hopefully every single day. Okay, so now moving on to my third tip. And this is potentially what might be the most important tip, especially for the beginning of your career, before you're making money, and even as you're starting to make money. It's not to obsess over gear. And we've all heard this a million times, but it's really hard to, it's really easy, I should say, to get trapped in the, kind of consumerist, capitalist kind of ideals of what all of the other photographers are using, what lenses or what cameras. Ultimately, you could have the best camera, but if you're not a good photographer, you'll still be taking worse photos than someone who's a really good photographer with bad or old or low quality gear. So, especially in the beginning, when you aren't making money from it or not making a lot of money yet from it, don't worry about investing hundreds or thousands into gear until you're making the amount of money that you can actually afford to invest and not lose money, So instead of obsessing over the gear and focusing on the gear, focus more on your skills, on the techniques, on learning about photography. If tip number 1 was to focus on taking photos a lot, tip number 4 is to also focus on developing your editing skills. You can take a pretty mediocre photo, but with really good editing skills, you can make it a great photo. You can also take a great photo and with really bad editing skills, turn that great photo into an ugly photo. So that's kind of half of the puzzle, is learning how to do the post-production, learning how to do the edits on the photos, and make the best out of the photos that you capture. So definitely focus on learning Lightroom, learning Photoshop. The guy that I was talking to had a background in graphic design, and I told him that's awesome because you already kind of have a leg up on a lot of people who don't have any background in using editing or post-production. And to have that background in graphic design and maybe good knowledge about Photoshop, that will translate to having the eye for editing photos and enhancing them in various ways. Some people go really, really hard on Photoshop and they start, removing stuff from an image and doing stamp tool replacements, and they start using masks and things to change the lighting in post. It's just really a good skill to develop to really bring your photos to that next level. Okay, so last but not least, my tip number 5 of how to become a better photographer and how to take better photos. Once you start getting through those first 4 tips, you're not worried about gear, you're taking lots of pictures, you're developing your style and your tastes and sensibilities as a photographer by learning from other photographers and other artists, you're developing your post-production editing skills as well. In my opinion, one of the first things you can look at in order to continue to grow once you're past that beginner stage is to start really thinking harder about the subjects that you're capturing themselves. So a lot of you have probably been here on Instagram, for instance, scrolling through photography and seeing a lot of kind of mundane subject matter. So in terms of the street photography niche, which is kind of what I'm in, there's a lot of sort of mundane buildings, sidewalks, rooftops, skylines. Like we've all been there, we've all seen those photos, we've all taken those photos. Me as well, and I want to challenge you to try to explore, if it's the same subjects, those boring subjects, try to explore ways to capture them in a unique way, whether that's in a unique lighting environment or with unique techniques and unique perspectives, or abandon those mundane subjects entirely and really focus on trying to find and think of and come up with non-mundane subjects. So what I've tried to do more recently is focus on capturing people, and not just people standing around, but people doing interesting things. A child running through the middle of the street, or using the architecture of the space to compose an image in a unique way, again, seeing it from a new perspective. And especially, a lot of us like to go to common popular photography spots in our cities. We all know what they are in our local area, and they've been photographed a million times by a million different photographers in a million different ways. And the challenge for you then is, how do you try to capture that in a unique way that's never been done before? And that's one of the hardest things as a photographer, but that's really the thing that's going to set you apart. So yeah, those are my top 5 tips for how to improve your photography. If you liked this video, be sure to let me know with a like or a comment down below. If you have any questions, also feel free to comment down below. If you want more videos like this, then definitely be sure to subscribe. I post videos every single month, and sometimes even more often than that. And if you want to follow my photography or cinematography journey, then be sure to either check out my website or follow me on Instagram. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.